Welcome to Meditations on the State of Education. This is pre-release content from the Future Education podcast brought to you by the University of the Universe. These are short vignettes, raw and minimal, overheard conversations, complaints, ideas for improvement, and meaningful stories. Listen closely, then share your thoughts on our socials as they go live. Today's snippet comes from my visit to the All-In Summit in Los Angeles, California from September 7th to 9th, 2025. It's among snippets from in and around the context of the gathering set near the USC campus. You'll also hear voices from outside the summit, such as a student reflecting on their own educational journey. The aim here is not polished production, but raw, unfiltered voices, real perspectives on what education is and what it could be. Our official launch of full production episodes is set for March 1st, 2026. You can subscribe now to stay in the loop and help shape this venture from its earliest stages into a foundation for powerful education for ourselves and our descendants for centuries to come. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and for sharing a passion with us for the continuous improvement of education for centuries to come. Fac et meliora in aeterno. Do, make, create, and improve for all eternity.
Okay, so I'm here with Tyler Donahue, and we're here at the All-In Summit, and I'm taking advantage of getting some astute opinions on the future of education. We've had a one-on-one for probably a good half hour, 45 minutes, and I thought, man, this guy's thinking deep. So I thought, let's put some of this on record. Why don't you give the listener here just a little background on yourself, and kind of the foundations of where you're coming from. And I don't know that we touched upon this already. Why education is important to you?
Yeah, okay. When you say background, is there a specific part of my background, like companies I started, or like the way I think about education, or where that came from? Like, is that the thread?
I would say let's hear about your professional journey. Okay. So, could be I worked at Subway when I was high school, and then I went on to this and that, or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah, tying it to education, I never felt like the school system worked for me. My teachers always complained about me to my parents and the ADHD or whatever. So yeah, school was not like my favorite place. And I started working kind of early for an MLM called Herbalife. It was my first kind of job selling supplements, and that's kind of how I first just realized that I could make income and live a lifestyle that I wanted based off of, just me making decisions. And I didn't need to ask for permission for anybody to earn. And that led to a bunch of things. I sold real estate. I sold insurance. I sold propane at one point. so many different things, just trying to find my place in the world, making income. At some point in time, I impressed somebody, and they invited me to be an entrepreneur resident at Draper University, which is Tim Draper's, Bill Draper's son, kind of a VC legend in Silicon Valley. He has a university called Draper University, which is a building that he bought, turned into a uni. Not really a uni, more like a private thing. And he has a accelerator called Boost VC. I was an ER there in 2016. And this was my first kind of insight into what...
Stop and give a definition before you say it. EIR?
EIR. Entrepreneur in residence is the term. And this was like the first time I saw an alternative path to education live was at this campus that he created. And, people from all over the world came here, and the whole idea was not this is learning for learning's sake, but for building and shipping something into the world. And he combined some Tony Robbins themes with like Silicon Valley themes. So it was very high energy and inspiring and exciting. And that was when I was like, holy shit, like this is what education should be like. So I got really excited about that and kind of put that in my back pocket for my career as I tried to create wealth and do things. Started a few companies along the way, sold one, started an agency that has been around for about 7 years now that works with creators and like launching merch and back office kind of stuff I was telling you earlier. And I met this guy. Somehow I impressed this guy called Peter Diamandis at one point, and he has become a really good friend. Worked with him on a lot of things. Launched his podcast, actually, the Moonshots podcast. Recently convinced him that he should do an event like the All-In Summit where we are now, but for the Moonshots podcast, calling it the Moonshots Summit. And the whole idea there is to inspire entrepreneurs to work on bigger, more inspiring, epic things. If you follow Peter, you know that he created X Prize. Wait for that. That he created X Prize, which is a massive prize organization that gives hundreds of millions of dollars for people that solve really big problems, like they're trying to reverse aging, or they're trying to the desalination, for example, turning salt water into drinkable water to solve the water problem. So he's all about big moonshots and visions, and we're launching the summit to bring these types of people together and inspire entrepreneurs to work on bigger shit.
Wow. Quite a journey. And it's I love doing these kind of things, and we'll see what content I'm able to release, and maybe I'll release this other interview, but
no pressure.
It's so interesting. Some of the themes that come out when you interview multiple people, because like I just talked to another person who had like such a similar story in a traditional education system. It's just almost like soul breaking somehow.
Mm-hmm.
and they're labeled as the problem. And then once they are let loose or discarded from the system, spit out from it or whatever, then that's when things open up. And there's a theme of also, a moment of just trial and error. It's like, I've tried that, I tried this, and I tried this, and I tried this, and and then something broke. So I love that though. It's good to, it was your journey, and you had your struggle and your but finding these themes is so important as we think about shortcutting, right? To bypass some of the unnecessary drama, right? of sitting through a classroom situation where you feel like the bad guy, but you're actually a very well-meaning, person with a lot of potential. I don't even answer for this. I know you care about working on this, but have you imagined in your particular case, and not to say that hard work and suffering is probably part of everyone's journey, how that could have changed for you, how you may have found your path and your genius a little bit sooner if the system was different?
Well, I think part of it is suffering. Like Viktor Frankl, the legend himself, has said in the Man's Search for Meaning, right? So I don't know if, or if you like Spider-Man, they call it the canon of the events that suffering. I don't know. I guess multiverse fans here, but the suffering's part of this whole thing. So I don't know if anyone can make it without that piece. I think that's part of the human evolution, and sometimes necessary for someone to be inspired to create change. I feel like these examples are used all the time, whether or not you like Elon Musk. He had a lot of suffering as a kid, and he probably wouldn't be, trying to make us an interplanetary species and solve the climate crisis with electric vehicles if he didn't have suffering. So it's a good thing or bad thing. I don't know. It's up to you. But that was the angle that.
Well, what I am curious though, even though the suffering is useful, suffering for its own sake is not necessarily useful, right? So, put it this way. Let's just say, here's a good example. I have a different podcast where I had a woman on who studies the neuroscience of practice for musicians.
Yeah.
And the neuroscience says that if you're trying to practice an instrument and you sit down and you're like, I'm going to practice this one piece for 4 hours in a row, and that's how my genius is going to come out from it, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because the neuroscience study shows you should only practice for maybe 20 minutes, and then you should take a 5-minute break, really. Because if you don't take the 5-minute break, then literally the cellular mechanisms in your brain that need to happen for the learning to take hold will not happen.
Of course.
And you'll like block them. And so in those cases, you got the strict teacher who's like, sit down and you practice for hours, and
of course. Flow state isn't reached through like grinding fully, right?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to get at is, what parts of the suffering were sort of that unnecessary side, or just to say, sometimes one person's suffering takes the next person's suffering not to a higher level, but a new level, right? Like we don't have to suffer through some of the things we did in the past because we developed technologies to bypass them. Now we have new obstacles that we're trying to overcome. But in short, if you want to answer it a different way, how do you see the future of education improving?
Yeah, so just super quick touch point on the suffering piece. There's that loop that is often talked about where hard times breed great people, and great people breed great times breed weak people, right? And weak people creates hard times, and hard times create great people, and so there's the cycle. And so that's the paradox of abundance, right? That, I don't know if there's a solve for that. I hope we find a way to engineer for some of this in the abundant world that I believe that will be created through technology. And I don't know the answer to that. So that'll be my last point there. I can go into the education thing if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Good. And so I've been thinking a lot about the future of education, and to me, it all comes down to agency. And I think the easy to understand example is through talking about digital labor. So digital labor is becoming abundant, and it's the worst it'll ever be right now. And soon, every human being on Earth, companies will have access to nearly unlimited amounts of digital labor to execute tasks on their behalf, and do add productivity to the workplace. And so now you can't be there's no longer you can't be a node or a widget in the workplace anymore. You can't get pretty soon the idea that you can get paid to execute a task will be gone, because digital labor will be executing all of the tasks. So what do? Well, you need to figure out how to leverage digital labor or to command digital labor to add value to the marketplace and to fellow humans or businesses. And how do you do that? Well, you need to have some sense of agency to be able to command and orchestrate digital labor to create value in the world. Maybe that is for another company, or maybe that's for yourself. I think that this fact is going to breed so many more entrepreneurs in the world. I think a lot more people are going to be self-employed or need to figure out how to be self-employed. And so I think that education needs to be restructured around that practically. Yeah,
that's very interesting. I also want to touch upon this, and you and I talked about this before this conversation, that you work with creators. Uh-huh. And this is something that I often talk about in this space. Is I remember back in probably around 2008 or something, Sal Khan of Khan Academy,
of course,
he had this video where he explained his philosophy of what the future was going to look like. And I think it was relatively prescient, where he's kind of saying there's going to be AI, there's going to be robots, and these tasks, like you're saying, are going to be taken care of. And what he said, which is actually kind of interesting in this current climate, was that the uniquely human thing was creativity. And that meant that we would need to individually focus on our personal creativity into the future, because that was our deeply human asset that the robots and the AI couldn't tackle. Now we're actually in a unique moment here where it seems like AI is being creative. That said,
That's why I think it's agency, because agency is the ability to take something creative, but let's say in the past, it's being able to take a human creative mind or a team of creative people and execute a vision or a goal or create value in the world.
Yes.
So creating value in the world takes a team of creative people, all orchestrated and focused on a specific objective. And so it's not just one creative person or being creative yourself. It's knowing how to empower creative people around you. And so, yes, that also happened with human beings, but now we're also going to be empowering digital labor to be creative on your behalf or behalf of the vision that you're trying to create or the value that you're trying to add to humanity.
Yeah, I do like that. Want to see if I make sure that I get this right. Because I've just come up with it here. It's a little embarrassing. I don't have it memorized, but I wanted a motto for the University of the Universe.
Cool.
Right?
Great.
And I forget whether you and I talked about this before, but
I don't think so.
I looked into the mottos of existing, high tier universities, Harvard and Cambridge and all this stuff. And a lot of the themes are around, knowledge and light and enlightenment and books, and a lot of even on the logos, right? You see the books, the open books, which is a very romantic and wonderful notion. And especially in light of the printing press and the power it brought to spread knowledge, it makes sense that has been a major value of the past several centuries in education. But very few of the institutions had a motto that had much to do with taking action, right? The focus was on absorbing information. And a rarity among them was like MIT. I think it's something like, the mind and the hand, meaning like the mind and then the hand does things. So the motto that I came up with was fac et meliora in aeternum.
Okay.
And I like that.
I don't speak Latin.
No, that's fine. I'm going to interpret it. And I brought this up with somebody else too, because this theme is coming up. Fac is the Latin word for make or do. And it's an imperative in this case, which means
and you need
do,
to talk to
right?
this first.
Et meliora means and do better, meaning go out and
make better
and keep improving. And then in aeternum means basically continuously or for eternity, right? So that's the theme of how we want this sort of institution, what it becomes to operate. It's focused on doing, right? Kind of like your whole life story and a lot of people's life story. You got to do all of these things. You got to try them in order to learn. You got to be committed to doing better continuously. You can't settle. And you have to be willing for it to be a completely an iterative process moving forward. And not only is that a great thing that we need to maybe educate the populace about so that they can be entrepreneurial and make things and do things with groups, but also the institution itself should have that ethos that the education that's created, the systems that created is something that is continuously upgraded as the future unfolds.
Yeah.
So I love that. It's totally in line, with the direction we're heading.
I like it. That's a great motto.
Moving forward, I'm not going to make these super long episodes or whatever. This is a pre-release content. So I'm loving everything we talked about so far. I want to make sure that, you have a moment, if you didn't already. I love the event that's coming up and the partnership, Peter. Is there anything else that you want to spread the word about? Or even just if it's words of wisdom or something to visit or check out or?
I don't know. I guess so. Like we were talking about earlier, the models of education. I think it's useful for people to think about education as in who's the customer. And so we're talking about the 4 customers of education. That one of them is the government, and they're trying to prove their citizens. The government is the customer; they're paying for it, or tax dollars is paying for it. However you want to frame it. Then there's the parent or the student, right? That is the customer. They're paying, and this is the university model, right? They're paying to learn something or to do something. Now, and then there's an employer, and the employer is paying for access to great talent. So I think Bloom Tech or was Lambda School kind of popularized this model in some ways, where they signed an ISA agreement, right? So you learn how to become a developer, and then the employer is the one paying Lambda School as a result of them being placed. That was the service that Lambda School provided to the employer. And finally, there's the market, who is the customer. And that one feels maybe a little more ethereal, but what I mean by that is like YC, I think, is a perfect example of this. They're an accelerator or a school, and they help people create value in the world, and they take a piece of the value that was created. Yeah. So in that regard, the market was the customer. They're the one who is paying for YC to exist, is the market, or the market and the talent together. And so I think that that's a useful framework to think about, and because ultimately we need the customer in order to evolve education. We need to be thinking about the customer first. I mean, we're not in a post-capitalistic society yet. Maybe we will be eventually, but right now, because we're in a capitalistic society, we need incentives to create the next version of education. And so it's important to think about what the incentives are so that we can frame it in their terms, in their dollar terms, and then mold the education that we think about in the future. And then the last thing I guess we've already said, which is agency is the skill, the ability to orchestrate, identify something in the world where you could add value, and to conspire a bunch of resources, humans and robots and AIs, in order to do that thing, to add value in the market, to add value to your fellow human beings, or maybe even to add value to your fellow robots. Who knows what will happen? And I think that's the most important skill. That's going to be the most important skill. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love it. Yeah, I totally agree. And for some reason, we are in a situation where, I mean, the current system does address these markets, but it's become pretty muddied because of the system that's been created, and we do have a status quo where, people are just kind of going to university because you're supposed to.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really breed very thoughtful approach to, the product and the customer and who they are and how to serve them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think universities have an amazing product, especially the Ivy Leagues of the world. They have incredible network power. And it's also it's a real thing, having an environment for learning. There's a special thing that happens at a school, like you mentioned, MIT, where there's a bunch of people that are just trying to help you build amazing things in the world. And everybody is there to do that. And there's a certain type of energy that brings. And historically, the innovation hubs of the world have been centered around universities. And so that can't go away. It needs to evolve, but I don't think that can go away.
Yeah, agreed. All right. If this is something that you can do, is there some way people can keep track now of the upcoming event? Is there a site they can visit? Should they reach out to, email? I know it's an approximate date right now, but what can you share so that if anybody's listening and they want to participate, they make sure that they can keep abreast and get in early and powerfully?
Sure. The event is the moonshotssummit.com. So moonshot, MOONSHOT summit.com, the Moonshot Summit. And I wrote a little bit of a thesis on how I see education evolving on my Substack, which is by Tyler D, BY2ILERD on Substack. It's probably the best two places.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking a minute to talk. I mean, it's such a privilege to hear people's thoughts and also just have the opportunity to collate this information and sort of see the patterns and bring them out. So I do really appreciate meeting you and you taking the time.
Ooh, likewise, man. This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Wonderful.
Back to the summit.